Greetings. I've decided to put together a series of short videos on the principles and practices of universal Sufism. And this particular video is an introduction to Hazrat Inayat Khan and what I consider to be, at least for me, his most important contribution, spiritual contribution. And that is the concept, ideal, and practice of spiritual liberty, which really is at the heart of his ideas about what spiritual unity really is connected to. The idea of spiritual unity does come initially from Islam, and it comes from the word tawhid, and it means the unity of all things, or the unity of God. Spiritual liberty is an ethical corollary to that. In other words, if you believe that all things not only are unified in their being, if you will, then, and also that they come from one place, then automatically that implies, or could imply, a posture towards others, a way of understanding and accepting who and where they are, and what they believe. And this concept of spiritual liberty is an important component of that. But first, let me talk briefly about Hazrat Inayat Khan, and this is very brief. There's obviously a lot more information than what I'll be giving you here, but this is just to give you a beginning point. Hazrat Inayat Khan was born into a well-known family of musicians in the Mughal courts, the late Mughal courts of India. He was born on July 5th, 1882, and he was raised to be a musician, a court musician, specifically playing the veena and also singing. When he was a young man in his late teens, he developed an interest in Sufism. This was also part of his family heritage. And he studied under a well-known Chistiya Sufi master and took initiations in 4 of the principal Sufi orders that are dominant in that part of India. And at the insistence of his teacher, or the guidance of his teacher, he left India and came to the West and began teaching in the West in 1910. He traveled throughout Europe, he traveled throughout North America, and his initial thought was that he would bring people into concert halls and play music, and through that music begin to teach them about Sufism. But it turned out that people were so interested in his message and how he spoke about these spiritual truths that they were more interested in that than in his playing. And so he ended up essentially giving up his public playing of the veena in order to teach the message of Sufism. He founded the first Sufi order connected to his teachings in 1914. It was called the Sufi Order in the West. And that organization was eventually reorganized in 1923 as being the first international Sufi movement. Later in that decade, he returned to India, where he contracted an illness and died on February 5th, 1927, at the age of 44. Since then, his teachings have gone on in several forms, and there now exist a number of different orders that can all trace their origins to his teachings, including what is now called the Inayati order, but was called the Sufi order International, the Sufi Message of Love, Harmony, and Beauty, the Sufi Ruhaniyat International, the Sufi Way, and the Fraternity of Light. I believe I've remembered most of the big ones. And we may have opportunity to talk about various of these different orders at different times, but that isn't important now. What is important is that Hazrat Nayak Khan believed and maintained that he was delivering to the West a new way of understanding the unity of all faiths. And he meant not only all official faiths or revealed faiths, but it's very clear from his writings and teachings that he also meant whatever faiths or creeds that people find themselves confronting or dealing with at any given time. And this is leading towards that concept of spiritual liberty. So to specifically begin talking about spiritual liberty, I want to read from a lecture that he gave that was entitled Spiritual Liberty, and this is just a short paragraph, but this will give you a kind of an introduction to where he begins when introducing this topic of spiritual liberty, which is at the core, I believe, of his ideas of universal Sufism. Beloved ones of God, you may belong to any race, caste, creed, or nation. Still you are all impartially beloved by God. You may be a believer or an unbeliever in the Supreme Being, but He cares not. His mercy and grace flow through all His powers without distinction of friend or foe. And this is Hazrat Nayak Khan posing with his Veena. And this idea that whether you're a believer or not, whether you subscribe to any particular spiritual or religious creed, that from God's perspective, it makes absolutely no difference. From the perspective of spirit, of the source, it does not matter who you are to begin with in terms of your soul. Now that's not to say it doesn't matter what you do, but it doesn't matter what you believe. The unity of religious ideals is about understanding that every human being starts somewhere. You can be an atheist and a materialist, but you believe in something. You can even be a sociopath, but you believe in something. It may be you, just you. It may be money. It may be, in that noodle dish that you get at that corner restaurant that you like. But we all believe in something. We all begin somewhere. And from Hazrat Nayak Khan's perspective, when you are dealing with people one-to-one, when you are dealing with people in your everyday life, you have to begin from the standpoint of understanding that whoever they are sitting in the same divine seat that you are, in a sense. Now, don't think that that's not difficult. It's extremely difficult. And this is a tall order. But as far as he was concerned, it's a place to begin. And it's also an ideal place. It's something that you hold in your heart when you are meditating, or when you are attempting to reach those better places in yourself. He completely understands that in the rush of everyday life, having that posture may be difficult in some circumstances. But this is what makes it universal. And he was specifically looking at the various conflicts between religious ideals and practices that existed in the world at his time. Certainly something that we still have to deal with today. So from his perspective, this was a stance that you take when you are trying to determine how you are going to relate to people. Are you just going to simply shut yourself off to people, from people who don't believe the way you believe? Or are you going to try to find some way of continuing to see and experience and understand them as a human being? This is a tall order, and it may seem like a very tall order now, but this is the beginning of what spiritual liberty really means. So Hazrat Nayak Khan does talk about, in many of his other lectures, he does talk about whether or not universal Sufism is a religion in and of itself. And he denies that it is a religion. He describes it as a posture, as a perspective that you take. He tried to take the perspective of God, which of course is a universal perspective. You know, if God is one source and there is only one thing that we all come from, then you have to try to, with your imagination, you have to try to figure out, well, how is it that all of these different things, this wild, crazy variety, not only of humanity, but all of the universe, how does it fit into one thing? Well, that's the ongoing project, is to try to figure that out. He does talk a little bit about what will happen, what he thinks will happen with religion in the future, though, whether there will be a future religion, whether that is even useful for human beings. And in one of his other volumes, or one of his other collections of lectures, the volume is called The Unity of Religious Ideals, he does have this to say. He says, what is the message of Sufism? Sufism is the message of digging out that water-like life which has been buried by the impressions of this material life. There is an English phrase, a lost soul. The soul is not lost. The soul is buried. When it is dug out, then the divine life springs out like a spring of water. And the question is, what is digging? What does one dig in oneself? Is it not true? Is it not said in the scriptures that God is love? Then where is God to be found? Is he to be found in the seventh heaven, or is he to be found in the heart of man? And please understand that he's saying he because that's what you said back in the early part of the 20th century. God is to be found in the heart of man, which is his shrine. But if this heart is buried, the heart which has lost that light, that life, that warmth, what does this heart become? It becomes as a grave. There is in a popular song in English a beautiful line which says, the light of the whole life dies when love is done. That living thing in the heart is love. It may come as kindness, as friendship, as sympathy, as tolerance, as forgiveness. In whatever form this living water rises from the heart, it proves the heart to be a divine spring. And when once the spring is open and is rising, everything that man does as an action, as a word, as a feeling, that is when man becomes religious. If there is any coming religion, a new religion to come, it will be this religion, the religion of the heart. After all, the suffering that has been caused to humanity by the recent war, and this is World War I, man is beginning to open his eyes. And as time will pass, he will open his eyes to know and understand that the true religion is in opening the heart, in widening the outlook, and in living the religion, which can be the only one true religion. And this, of course, has nothing to do with creeds. It has nothing to do with religion. The word originally meant, the word comes from the Latin, and it means that which to which you are bound by obligation or by duty, that which you feel, in a sense, the need to give to or to commit yourself to. And obviously that can be a spiritual creed, but it can also be an ethical posture. It can also be a philosophical stance. It can be the scientific approach. It doesn't make any difference, And this is what spiritual liberty means. What comes from your heart? What comes from your heart? Because if it comes from your heart and springs from that spring of love, then that is what the religious outlook is for you. Toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of Guidance. Amen.